morning, everyone. Hands up those who held their breath yesterday and were sadly disappointed. Yeah, I think we all are. So I'm just going to introduce my presentation. There's more honesty in this one, and there's no mention of email servers anyway. So we'll try and give you the honesty about my learnings of change in the AA. So the agenda really is it's about a bit about the AA, the challenge that we're facing, the background, and kind of my 5 top learnings from it. So if we start with who's the AA, I mean, the first measure I've got there, I've been in the AA 2 years now, and when I mentioned to my family, they said, "Oh, they're going to sort your drinking out, Dad." So I mean, they've obviously moved on that, but there's obviously that that tie. So who are the AA? I think when you look at the AA, everyone says it's the most trusted commercial brand. I mean, it's incredibly powerful. Every brand survey that you ever came up for, it's not just it's a benefit as well as a challenge, because it tempts them to go into all sorts of other markets as well. Obviously, customer loyalty, tremendously loyal membership base, average tender sometimes over 20 years. It's got 3.7 personal members, and it's got 10 million through B2B, and nearly 2,900 dedicated patrols. And they win all sorts of prizes for the guys in the vans that come out all weathers. And there's some incredible stories of rescues. And if you watch their ad, all sorts of funny tales of broken down double driving cars and all that kind of stuff. So a fantastic business. But to give it its context, it also had some great challenges they were facing. Before they were bought by the current owners, they were owned by a venture capitalist, and it was all run as separate units, and everyone was fighting for the customers. So it was a bit more like a Monty Python play, a sort of Spam-A-Lot to their customers, and they became renowned as such. So they needed to move away from that really quickly, with a technology that allowed them to do that. And it also reflected in organisation. They had no project managers, business analysts, any sort of management grade. They just multitasked everybody. The IT platform was very dated and inefficient. One of the guys on the team, he recognised the coding from 15 years ago when he started out in the AA. So that was there was nothing written down either. So there was quite a lot of challenges, and then at the same time they're going to put in a new CMS system as Sitecore, so Pega and the Sitecore for a CMS. So some really big changes to put in all at one go. So what about for me? Why does that give me a change? So I've had a wide range of clients, both both client side, consultancy side and agency side, and suppliers in terms of technology. So I've got a unique perspective in terms of I've been the thinker, the kicker, and the kicked in delivering change across digital, IT, and a business change. So what I've done for the lawyers amongst you, so some of the learnings I'm going to talk about don't just relate to the AA. So that's my opt-out for any sort of liability. So, because I've got the hard gig, which is the one before lunch, I thought I'd take you a little challenge about my learnings. So every picture represents one of my learnings. And again, being marketing, there's left brain, right brain, all that sort of stuff, where logical side and your creative side. So we're going to test and see if you can guess any of these, or if you just think that the speaker's a bit mad. But you can make your own conclusion when we've finished. So if are we all with this? Do you think we can guess any of these? So the first one is this picture. That's one of my first learnings. Any ideas?
Choices.
Yeah? Nearly?
You can't go both ways.
Sorry?
You can't go both ways.
Yes, it's more of this. It's really clear strategy and direction. And it sounds like pretty obvious and, grandma and apple pie. But once you get into it, it becomes really quite difficult. So in the case of the AA, what products? So in the case of the AA, operating lots of silos, and how do you choose your menu and what gets prominence and what doesn't get prominence? And you think that's quite simple, but once you get into in digital design and UX and stuff, it becomes a lot difficult. And to whom? Old people, young people, they all access things in different ways. How do you serve it up without the data to do it? The next one is kind of pricing as well. I mean, I think you look at most industries, they struggle with this. The acquisition department are always fighting with the retention department. What offers surfaces and what place, again, it has to be clearly thought through. And that really kind of means that you have to have a really good idea of lifetime value, which sometimes some companies don't have. And then you get into the IT guts of it all, and do you have a logged in state, unlogged in state, how do you access the site? All sort of learnings about having a clear view on what you want to offer and who you want to offer it to. And then, of course, the other thing that throws up with, especially with a big change that we've just seen, is the operating model. So who's going to do it? Are you going to have that peak project thing and then tail off, or are you going to keep some staff further on? The AA was really run on quite a lot of skeleton staff, and they were kind of struggling with that as a learning going forward, if that makes sense. Right, second one. Any clues? And we are really, really ready for lunch, aren't we? Well, I think who's the most important person we have to deal with? Customer. Let's say customers. So good insight on what the customer wants. So what channels to engage with? Tone of voice. So with the AA, we had to go through quite an exercise in figuring out the right tone of voice, and it was all part of the rebranding process. What channels and in what ways? So I mean, everyone knows the route planner on the AA. There's a whole bunch of people who accessed a hidden part of the AA that you only knew if you had an old bookmark to a browser still 10 years old. So you have all these things, all these great things you have to make decisions about that people are quite opinionated about. And then, how much customization do you do as well? So it's a challenge to get the data right. Also, how to treat different customers. Change approach by segment. Again, it meant a long discussion about personas and getting that really focused. And again, with a multi-product customer, that is sometimes a product company, that's often quite difficult to do. Also, the level of technology, and so coming out of, if you haven't got the data strategy and sorted and a clear insight, it's about mapping out that route to personalization. And integrating the offline-online experience and how it should be different. I think that there's an experience you have with when you get picked up and broken down. How's that integrate again with the online experience? How the contact centres. How's that different customer bases? So lots of detailed process work you need to get right if it's going to work. And also there's the whole adage about getting things perfect before you start. So you can spend a huge amount of money on research and getting absolutely polished, but actually when you put it out there, you find from testing it doesn't do things half as well as you thought it did. So one of the other learnings would really be to actually try and get something out there early, rather than spend hours polishing and your designs with user research to find out if it works or not. So it's right, next. So a couple of other examples of this. So for the AA, they've done a great job with their app. It's actually an Uber style, so you break down, you press a button, follows you all the way through. Great insight, thousands of calls, I can't remember the percentages, but we're into the contact centre just to find out where are they, have they arrived, all those sort of things. But on the other side, one of the areas we struggle with, putting an AA app on a watch, well, what's the relevance? I think just because technology's there doesn't mean you do it. You have to really think about, go back to customer insight and the journey they're going on and what's going to suit them and be prepared to adapt to suit. One of my favourite examples, I don't know if you've seen it, is the smart umbrella. Have anyone seen this? You can now have a smart and a dumb umbrella. So, you know, it tells you when it's going to rain. So, I mean, if you live in England, you don't have that problem generally. It's immensely complex technology solution to something that's quite basic. In fact, they even sell the bits so you can make your dumb umbrella smart. And then when you extract the news story of this, it just does actually, the news stories do quickly drop off. So I think that sort of the challenge is when you start doing transformation and looking at technology is really get a good handle on the insight in the customer and see if it's going to work for them or not. Oh, incidentally, how much do you think they sold it for? What would you pay for it? Yeah, nearly $125, which, you know, post-Brexit is going to be about £125, isn't it? So there you go. I haven't got any stuck in the car, by the way.
How's it doing?
It's disappeared. That's what so actually, if you follow the thing, it's sort of you can fire it to about March, April, and you see that's when they run out of money with their venture capitalists. So it just shows you. Right, this one. Any clues? Sorry?
Is this a guinea pig?
It's a mouse, I suppose.
Totally fluffy.
Yes, almost.
Testing.
No.
Small stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Well done. So small things that detail matter, but especially for marketeers, get carried away without thinking about the IT elements of that. And the detail will kill you. The level of customer data questions, and data quality and permissions. I had a stint at Shell where I ran the loyalty program. I think we had 6 different permissions via database, which made running marketing campaigns extremely difficult. So all these things have to get into your program plan for sorting out your digital transformation, because if you suddenly unveil it and someone at the back says, well, actually, you can't do that, you catch a cold. There's also some of the thing, it's can your infrastructure cope with it? You know, there's loads of stories of this falling over, Olympics website, all this sort of stuff. It really is having detail. I mean, I think it's about having an honest discussion, business and IT, around what people are prepared to trade off from a service against cost. Because what you find is that, you know, everyone wants a Rolls-Royce service, but actually we don't actually turn through over the risk or the costs of what people are prepared to pay for. Non-functional requirements is a very techie word for actually you're actually getting technical about how your digital technology will work, what it will work with, if someone goes off. As the bloke, so we talk about Rebel IT, so there was various systems on this particular one where it was written by one guy who lived in Cyprus, and third line support. You forget it, if he could pull himself off the beach, he might sort out your software. So it's all about digging into that and having a fastidious persecution of the detail. So something to think of there. So next one is another, and this isn't the US election, by the way. It's not trying to be topical. Any guesses? Nearly. What are they after? Okay, management of requirements. So a lot of this areas, a lot of projects and programs are run first, is that people fail to understand what level of detail, if you go into any sort of build or digital build, you need to get it right. I mean, I worked for Diageo in the US, and we made a big web order capture for their distributors. And we thought we got everyone agreeing on the requirements, apart from the supply chain guy who refused to turn up occasionally. There's four or five different companies, and we basically built a web order capture bit for basically building a shopping cart in a lorry to buy booze, basically. And we all unveiled it, and everyone's really happy. And the guy at the back who never towed up said, "Actually, I buy all my stock in trains." And we hadn't considered trains, we only got lorries. So then we had to go back to the start and start again. So it's a kind of really kind of key learning that, you know, you've got to get all stakeholders involved and prioritize as well, because everyone, you know, once you let the genie out the out of the bottle, tracing what you can do with digital, you just get this whole sort of host of I want this, I could do that, wouldn't it be nice? And it's kind of got to follow the values. Also, decision making on requirements. It sounds kind of obvious, but especially where you share a function, and in the AA, it meant working across different business units. It's sometimes not clear who's going to make the final call, especially when you have them chasing the same customer segment group, and what's the best thing for the company and what's the best thing for the consumer. I think it's trying to get some principles to get that right. Who's tracking the requirements? It's a kind of a dull end of that, and I think one of the projects that I've been about was about it went round and round and round from test and bouncing from test back to the business with more requirements because there really wasn't anyone who was tracking what was been ordered, and by the time they delivered it, there was a new person in charge and they wanted something different. So the project only cost 3 or 4 times what it should do. And actually putting a decent business analyst on it, we were able to drag it back and push it over the line to completion. But again, it's sometimes very difficult. In actual fact, it's often quite difficult and harder than you think. So one of the projects that I was involved in was that both the agency, the build partner, and the consultancy couldn't figure out from the business person what the proposition was, we even got into doing a newspaper, trying to do a newspaper to try and work out what the headlines were, to be able to figure out what the proposition was. So it's often very difficult in terms of working this out. Ring any bells? Anyone who's doing translator to transformation here? Does it ring any bells with this stuff?
Do you find the requirements stay static during your process?
No, I don't think we've had one. I think you kind of have to. I think it's come back to one of the challenges with A was introducing agile at the same time. So that is also so. But people get the mindset because they want a waterfall plan, but they want to do agile ways of working. So that is also a challenge. So again, that's another cultural thing in the pot. Wouldn't it? So here was some of the, I don't know if you've seen this cartoon, but it's kind of an enlightened thing. This is what marketing suggested, what management approved, designed by engineering, what was manufactured, health and safety, my favourite, and then what maintenance installed it, and then finally sold by the sales department, see? Okay. And then finance, well, friends at finance, so, I think it's always an ugly battle sometimes, and then what the actual customer wants. So, I mean, I think at least with digital, you can especially with agile, you can move it around pretty quickly. But I think if you can get stuck in the requirements bit for too long, it's a question of when you draw the line on it and actually get something out there and build. I mean, if you look at Google, I mean, they got some great quotes about get out and then quick to fail and all this sort of stuff. Right, final one. Anyone this one? So, nearly. Often used in politics far too much.
Corrupt collaboration.
Stakeholder buy-in and engagement. So, yeah, that's really are the right people involved? Have they bought into it? It's such a classic thing. You start on a project, and everyone goes, "Oh, well, it's kind of I think I'm not going to take my best person off this or backfill them." I've done several pieces of work where actually the company said, well, we're going to actually take our performance back rather than backfill everybody, which seems horrendous when you think about it. But it is a challenge because the best people design are your best people, and then there's always a price to pay. And there's also getting the decisions made in the right time. One of the projects was involved with the guy that we got it completely wrong. The guy made a decision in it. We cornered him in a airport lounge to make a decision on a mobile, and then they wondered why it didn't quite work how it's supposed to work, because we'd forced him to make a call that was the wrong one. Do they know what they are getting? So a big part of getting any sort of transformation right is the vision at the beginning. I think you cannot over-communicate. It's kind of my learning on the whole thing. And if you can't relate it to people on a day-to-day basis lower down, it just gets lost. I mean, the trouble with all of these things, it's bullshit bingo. You know, it starts with all the, you know, the various statements about, you know, upsell, you know, cross-sell and all the rest of it. But if you're on the front line and you're a patrol guy or you're taking a call, if you don't know what that means, it is completely lost. And it's a kind of a bottom-up, top-down rationalization of these things, along with the requirements. So change management. So again, not to be underestimated. It's communicate. I think it also offers very interesting things about unsung responsibilities across departments and who's doing what. It has to be really articulated well. People hold a lot of the knowledge and processes in their heads, and once you go into digital, then everything becomes a lot faster. It becomes a lot more difficult. I did some work with one of the AA's competitors. It was not difficult to figure out who. They did a CRM implementation some years ago now, and first of all, one of the customers rang up and said, "Oh, you sent me a cheque for £20,000. I only wanted 20 quid." And that ceased from assumptions about how things worked that was made at a fairly senior level that didn't reflect what happened. And they also had sort of things like they were taking money off people who they knew had died, and but they just carried on the process. The machine carried on taking money off them. A lot of these things, another sort of learning is that actually it's not always technology that solves those kind of issues. And in the building for the RAC, it's on the one that sits on the M5, there was people there who'd worked there 15 years that didn't know people on the other side of the building who worked on the same process. And actually getting all the people in together and having effective coffee morning, they figured it out. So that was kind of like the change management light went on, that not all of it's about technology, but a lot about figuring out how the people interactions work. So just another sort of graphic. The other thing is sort of, I think everyone kind of relates to is a lot of the thing about when you get into doing change and trying to make change stick is pinning the tail on the donkey in terms of who's responsible for what. Because there's lots of grey areas, and it does mean a different way of working. So in the RSC state, it was about getting everyone in a room and being really clear where the handoff happens, that it wasn't all workflow, and it couldn't always work naturally because people are quite don't always follow a process. And I think that was one of the kind of often the biggest thing when you're trying to ground the change and make sure it works. It's making sure responsibility is clearly defined. So these are kind of like my 5 major learnings. We didn't do too bad on the guess in front, I think, but yeah, I've decided I'm still mad. I'd just like to finish with one of my favourite quotes from Mr. Porter. No strategy lecture is ever complete without a quote from him, which is, the essence of strategy is choosing not what to do. When you start these change programs, it really does open the Pandora's box to what you can and can't do. There's always a massive pent-up demand when there's suddenly a big capex to spend and they're going, we can do all this. But it's immensely difficult to actually choose which things to do unless you've got absolutely a concrete vision of where the value really sits, rather than, oh, wouldn't it be nice to do this? And, oh, shall we go and build an umbrella that's a smart? So on that point, I'd like to leave you. Thanks very much.